Hello, everyone. Phil Lee returning with another episode of Civil War Chat. Today is Tuesday, the 29th of March, 2022. Our topic today is going to be the two sides of cultural appropriation. Before we get into that, I want to show you my latest book, The Dreadful Frauds, Critical Race Theory and Identity Politics. If these two doctrines take charge and become the standard interpretation of American history and how our society got to where it is, there will be no room for Confederate monuments. They'll be raised everywhere. And generally, any kind of a Southern tradition to our history will be demonized. And if you want to combat that, then you may want to buy this book and learn more about it. And if you buy the book and you like it, please give it a 5-star rating. That really helps us out. As you can see, we don't have a big university behind us to promote our books. So whatever you can do helps us out a lot. And you have helped us. We appreciate that. Let me go ahead and get started now with the presentation. The two sides of cultural appropriation. In 2016, Yale student Jerry Lynn Luther humiliated one of her professors by hysterically shouting at him in the presence of many other students that he should not have defended his wife's email, urging students to be tolerant of Halloween costumes styled after Indians and other ethnic minorities. The students considered it a cultural appropriation. But instead of being disciplined by Yale, Jerry Lynn was later given a Columbia Law School fellowship reserved for Blacks only, despite her outrageous behavior. Interestingly, Jerry Lynn and the media and whoever else, I guess the instructors who taught her to adopt the attitudes that she did, they had no problem 7 years earlier when Tennessee Williams's Cat on a Hot Tin Roof had a 140-day Broadway revival, followed by a successful run in London with an all-Black cast. Now, considering that Williams wrote the play about a 1950s era white family headed by a wealthy patriarch known as Big Daddy, who owned a 17,000-acre Mississippi farm, commonly referred to by the stage characters as a plantation. Well, that's about as extreme as a cultural appropriation can get. Yet the play collected $100,000 in ticket sales per day during the Broadway run and was generally well received by the New York theater critics. None of those critics, to my knowledge, criticized the play for so-called cultural appropriation. This was in 2008 or 2009. Perhaps the reason they didn't criticize it is because the setting was changed from the impossible 1950s to the improbable 1980s. Now, personally, I have no objection to an all-Black cast for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. In fact, I'd like to see that performance. I'd like to see how the characters are interpreted differently than they would have been than they have been portrayed by whites in previous performances. Having spent his first 5 years of life on a Mississippi farm, James Earl Jones, who plays the Big Daddy character in the all-Black performance, told a London newspaper that he could authentically portray a redneck because he was a Black version of one, in a sense. Perhaps he has a point. Black Southern farmers, such as Candace Owens' grandfather, often honor traditional values and have a simple Christian faith uncorrupted by too much navel gazing and academic education. But let us consider another example of a cultural appropriation that dates to World War I and involves the traditionally xenophobic Japanese. Now, when the war broke out, the Japanese had sided with Great Britain and her allies, and they promptly attacked Germany's only Asian colony, Tsingtao. They quickly conquered it and put the 5,000 German soldiers of the garrison into Japanese prisoner of war camps for the duration of the war, which would be over 4 years. 1,000 were sent to a camp in Bando, and they passed time by designing and printing postcards, publishing newspapers, and performing plays and concerts. After the war, those soldiers at Bando waited almost a year for the ships to carry them back to Germany. During that time, they performed Beethoven's Ninth Symphony to a Japanese audience outside the camp. Even though the performance included only male voices, the Japanese were impressed. The Ninth's popularity in Japan dates to that performance. Now, according to various reports during the 1980s, one of the top 2 Sony executives or his wife admired Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. He or she insisted that the newly invented compact music disc format be able to play the entire symphony on a single disc. And the vinyl LPs at the time sometimes required not only that you had to flip over the LP, but sometimes you had to play a disc and a half to get the entire 74 minutes. Now, since the longest vinyl recording of the symphony in the 1980s was 74 minutes, Sony set that as the standard playtime for their CDs, and Sony became the industry standard. Presently, some of the best performances of Western classical music is provided by Japanese orchestras. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony is performed every New Year's Eve and broadcast across the country. The Japanese have demonstrated that so-called cultural appropriation often enriches the so-called appropriating culture. The all-black casting of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof may have demonstrated the same point. I don't know, I never watched it, but I would have liked to have seen it. Those who today fanatically condemn so-called cultural appropriation are ruining America. But again, to learn more about how they're ruining America, consider getting The Dreadful Frauds by Philip Lee, Critical Race Theory and Identity Politics. If you'd like an autographed copy, email me, Phil, Phil _Lee, LEIGH @me.com. Okay, that's our show for today, and thanks for watching.